If someone had told me that the people who brought me into this world would one day pretend I didn't exist, I would have laughed. I mean, who abandons their own child on graduation day? But that's exactly what happened. One moment I was standing on the school field, holding my certificate with tears in my eyes, ready to make them proud, and the next, I was watching their car speed away like I was nothing more than an inconvenience they'd finally escaped. I didn't cry, not in front of everyone. I swallowed that pain like fire, and that fire turned into fuel. I told myself that day, fine. If you don't want to celebrate me now, you'll remember me later. And trust me, they did. Years later, when I walked into that reunion, I wasn't the abandoned kid anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming. Welcome to my story, one of betrayal, transformation, and a comeback so shocking that even my own parents forgot how to breathe when they saw me again. I remember the day of my graduation like it was yesterday. The sun hung lazily over the campus, painting everything in gold, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had achieved something truly meaningful. 4 years of sleepless nights, endless assignments, and sacrifices that seemed to go unnoticed by everyone except me had finally culminated in this moment. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I imagined my parents sitting there in the crowd, clapping proudly, maybe even whispering words of encouragement. Maybe my father would finally acknowledge my accomplishments, and my mother would beam with pride as she always did in photos with other families. But when I scanned the audience, my chest tightened. They weren't there. Not in the front row. Not in the back. Not anywhere. A hollow ache gnawed at me, a feeling I hadn't experienced before but would never forget. I checked my phone for any messages, any explanation, but there was nothing. No text, no call, not even a single word. And just like that, my so-called family, my parents, had abandoned me on what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. I won't lie, the sting of betrayal hit me harder than I had ever imagined possible. I could feel my hands trembling as I walked off the stage, diploma in hand, surrounded by cheering strangers who felt like friends but were strangers in the most literal sense. That day, I didn't just graduate from college, I graduated from the illusion that my parents would ever truly be there for me. And yes, before I go any further, I want to take a moment to ask you to like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to my channel because if you've ever felt abandoned or let down by someone you trusted, this story is going to resonate with you in ways you can't imagine. After the ceremony, I waited. I waited for them to appear at the celebratory dinner we had planned, hoping against hope that they'd show up late, maybe with an apology or a silly excuse. But hours passed and nothing came. The restaurant lights flickered as the night grew deeper, the empty chairs beside me mocking every expectation I had ever held. I couldn't understand it. How could they just walk away? Was it me? Did I do something wrong? My mind spun with questions that had no answers, and every time I tried to call them, my calls went straight to voicemail. I felt invisible, like a ghost wandering through a world that had forgotten I existed. I left that night with my heart heavier than my diploma. On the drive home, I replayed every memory I had with them, birthdays, holidays, small moments of laughter, and tried desperately to find a reason for their absence. But the harder I searched, the more apparent it became. They had chosen themselves over me. Their social image, their comfort, their convenience mattered more than the child they had promised to support, guide, and love unconditionally. Anger began to simmer in my chest, mingled with a sadness that made it hard to breathe. How could people who brought me into this world just abandon me at a time when I needed them most? The days that followed were the hardest. I tried to go about my life, immerse myself in work, friends, and the small routines that kept me afloat, but every congratulatory message from distant relatives, every smile from a stranger, reminded me of what I lacked. I felt like an outsider in my own life, cast aside by the very people who were supposed to be my safe haven. And yet, as I sat in my room one night, staring at the walls that had been witness to my struggles and my triumphs, a spark ignited inside me. I realized something powerful. Their abandonment did not have to define me. I had survived without them this far. I could thrive without them too. It wasn't instant, this decision to reclaim my life. Anger and hurt tangled with determination in a messy knot inside me. I replayed their faces in my mind, how indifferent they were, how comfortably they left me behind, and I promised myself that someday somehow they would see what they had done. But this wasn't about revenge, at least not yet. This was about proving to myself that I could rise above betrayal, that I could become someone they couldn't ignore, even if they wanted to. In the quiet nights that followed, I began to sketch a new path for myself. I wrote down goals that were bigger than their expectations, dreams that didn't depend on anyone's approval, and ambitions fueled purely by my own will. I thought about education, about careers, about opportunities that would take me far from the shadow of abandonment. And through it all, I nurtured a quiet, simmering plan. One day I would return, not broken, not desperate, but strong, confident, and undeniable. One day I would show them that walking away didn't diminish me, it only forged me into someone unstoppable. The emptiness I felt on graduation day had left a scar, yes, but it had also planted the seed of resilience. I learned that love from others is a gift, but the love and belief you cultivate in yourself are unshakable. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the years ahead, years that would test me, challenge me, and shape me into someone entirely new. And as I closed my eyes, I made a silent vow, one that would guide every choice, every step, and every risk I would take. I would not let their betrayal define the rest of my life. Instead, I would define myself, and when the time came, they would witness the result of abandoning someone they had underestimated. That was the day my journey truly began, not with applause or celebration, but with heartbreak, anger, and the unyielding promise to myself that I would rise above it all. And even though I didn't yet know the exact path, even though the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: the child they left behind would not just survive, they would thrive. And when they saw me again, it wouldn't be as the helpless child of yesterday, they would see someone they could never ignore, someone who had turned betrayal into power. The days after graduation felt like stepping into a storm I hadn't prepared for. I had a diploma in my hands, a symbol of achievement, but no one to celebrate it with, no safety net to fall back on. My parents' absence had left me untethered, like a small boat in a raging ocean, and I quickly realized that if I wanted to survive, I couldn't wait for anyone to throw me a lifeline. I had to build one myself. At first, life was brutal. I worked odd jobs, waitressing until my feet ached, delivering packages through sweltering heat, and tutoring younger students late into the night just to make ends meet. Every paycheck felt like a tiny victory, every exhausted night a testament to my endurance. I slept in cramped apartments, cooked simple meals, and forced myself to smile even when the weight of loneliness pressed down on my chest like a stone. But slowly, painfully, I began to discover something I hadn't known I possessed: resilience. I realized that the void left by my parents' abandonment could be filled with something far stronger than pity or regret. It could be filled with determination. In the midst of struggle, I found mentors and allies who recognized potential in me I had almost forgotten existed. A professor who had once complimented my thesis invited me to assist on a research project. A kind manager at the cafe where I worked taught me the value of discipline and leadership. Even a friend from college, noticing my quiet drive, encouraged me to chase opportunities one hadn't dared to imagine. Slowly, the person I was becoming began to take shape. Someone independent, confident, and unafraid to fight for every inch of success. And yet, despite the progress, the shadow of my parents lingered. Every milestone, every achievement came with a quiet, unspoken question. What would they say if they saw me now? I tried not to think about it, to focus solely on my growth, but fate has a funny way of reminding you that the past never truly disappears. One evening, scrolling aimlessly through social media, I stumbled upon a post that made my stomach twist. There it was, a photo of my parents attending a fancy gala, laughing and posing with people I didn't know. They looked happy, successful, untouched by any sense of accountability for abandoning me. My first instinct was rage. How could they enjoy themselves while I had scraped and clawed my way through every hardship alone? But amid the anger, a seed of clarity took root. Their lives, beautiful as they might appear, didn't diminish the strength I had built in the shadows of their absence. If anything, their complacency made my potential even more potent. I had something they lacked: grit, resilience, and a fire that came from surviving without them. It was then I realized something startling, something that sent chills down my spine. One day I could return not as the child they left behind, but as someone entirely unrecognizable to them. Someone powerful enough to shock them to their core. Life continued to test me. I enrolled in night classes to further my education while juggling multiple jobs. Exhaustion became a familiar companion, and there were nights I cried silently in my small apartment, wondering if the sacrifices were worth it. But every hardship, every sleepless night, became a brick in the foundation of the person I was constructing: strong, independent, and unyielding. Slowly, I began to see the outlines of the life I wanted. A life where I would never have to rely on anyone who didn't see my worth, where my happiness and success would be defined solely by me. Along the way, I discovered hints that my eventual return could have an even greater impact than I initially imagined. Through casual conversations, I learned that my parents still talked about me, though often dismissively or out of embarrassment. A distant relative mentioned that a family reunion was being planned, an event that would gather all the extended family together. My heart skipped a beat at the thought. The timing could be perfect. Not only could I attend, but I could arrive with the power of my accomplishments, ready to make them confront the consequences of leaving me behind. And then, as if fate had decided to throw me a gift, I stumbled upon a secret, something my parents had long buried about their social dealings, their pride, and the choices that had led them to abandon me. It was a tiny piece of information, something that on its own might seem trivial, but in the right hands, or the right moment, could amplify the impact of my return exponentially. My mind raced. The years of struggle, the nights of doubt, the endless grind, they had all been preparing me for this one moment, this opportunity to step back into their lives on my own terms. By the time I stood in front of a mirror one late night, brushing the strands of hair from my face and staring into my own eyes, I realized something transformative. I had power now. Real power, not the hollow influence that money or status could buy. The power of growth forged in adversity, the power of self-reliance, and the power to confront the very people who had abandoned me. My reflection stared back, confident, unafraid, and unwavering. I wasn't just imagining the reunion anymore, I was planning it, envisioning the shock, the disbelief, and the reckoning that would inevitably follow. The thought of seeing them again sent a thrill through me, a combination of fear, anticipation, and undeniable satisfaction. I had changed in ways they couldn't comprehend. I had survived when they had expected me to break. I had thrived when they had hoped I would falter. And now, years later, I had the means, the confidence, and the presence to step into their carefully curated world and remind them of the child they left behind, and how far that child had come. The night ended with a quiet determination. I lay in bed, exhausted but exhilarated, thinking about the journey ahead. Every struggle had been worth it, every heartbreak a lesson in endurance. I had transformed from the abandoned graduate into someone who commanded attention without demanding it, who carried success not as a weapon, but as proof of resilience. And as sleep finally claimed me, I whispered a vow into the darkness. One day they would see me again, and when they did, nothing would ever be the same. By the time that day comes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The child they thought powerless, abandoned, and invisible had become someone they could never ignore. And the thought of the shock on their faces filled me with a strange, intoxicating mix of excitement and vindication. I first heard about the reunion through a casual comment from a distant cousin on social media. At first, I nearly scrolled past it, thinking it was just another post that didn't concern me. But then I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. The reunion, a gathering of the very family who had once dismissed me, was scheduled for a weekend just a few weeks away. The thought of them all gathered in one room, oblivious to the fire they had once ignited in me, sent a shiver down my spine. For years I had dreamed about this moment, but now that it was real, my mind raced with possibilities. I spent the next few days meticulously planning. Every detail mattered. How would I enter the room? What would they see first? The confidence in my stride, the aura of success, the subtle hints that I had thrived without them. Or would I drop a bombshell revelation about their past misdeeds, something they had hidden carefully for years? Each scenario played through my mind like a rehearsal in slow motion. I wasn't just planning a reunion, I was orchestrating a moment that would leave them speechless, questioning every choice that had led to my abandonment. I considered my appearance. I didn't want to be flashy, but I wanted them to notice the transformation. The person who had once waited anxiously for their approval had grown into someone self-assured, polished, and undeniably powerful. The subtle elegance of tailored clothes, a confident posture, the way I held my head high, all of it was a declaration. I had survived. I had thrived. And now I was stepping into their world on my own terms. But as the plan took shape, a question nagged at me. Should I confront them directly? Should I call out their past negligence, force them to face the guilt they had buried so deep? Or should I let my presence alone speak volumes, letting the shock of seeing what I had become be the punishment in itself? I imagined the looks on their faces, disbelief, confusion, maybe even fear. My pulse quickened just picturing it. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about validation, about finally showing them the strength they had ignored for so long. To make the moment even more impactful, I began to gather subtle reminders of their past mistakes, things they had assumed would remain hidden forever. Little pieces of information, carefully obtained, that could amplify the effect of my presence without me having to say a single word. Every discovery added a thrill to my preparations, a silent power growing inside me. I wasn't just planning an appearance, I was crafting an experience, one that would ensure they remembered the day I returned for the rest of their lives. Each night, I rehearsed in front of the mirror, testing expressions, imagining dialogue and refining the timing of every revelation. Should I arrive early, observe them, and let anticipation build? Or should I make a dramatic entrance, commanding attention the moment they least expected it? My mind churned with scenarios, each more exhilarating than the last. The anticipation was electric, almost unbearable, but I knew that patience would make the moment more powerful. I had waited years for this. A few more hours of careful planning were nothing. I also considered the reactions of the extended family, the people who had watched me struggle from the sidelines or perhaps never noticed me at all. Their astonishment would add fuel to the moment, amplifying the impact on my parents. I imagined whispered conversations, wide eyes, and awkward glances, the perfect backdrop for my grand reveal. Every small detail, from my timing to my demeanor, was part of a larger tapestry, woven to create an unforgettable confrontation without a single unnecessary word. As the hours ticked closer to the reunion, my excitement mingled with a strange, nervous tension. I had spent so long imagining this day that I almost feared reality couldn't live up to expectation. But deep down I knew it would. I had transformed in ways they could never have predicted. Every struggle, every lonely night, every moment of doubt had prepared me for this very instant. I wasn't the abandoned child anymore. I was someone who could walk into a room and command attention, power, and respect without needing to beg for it. Finally, standing in my room the night before the reunion, I felt a quiet, electrifying certainty settle over me. I looked at myself in the mirror and let the reflection sink in. Strong, independent, unshakable, ready. The child they had abandoned had grown into someone they couldn't ignore, someone whose mere presence would force them to confront the consequences of their choices. And just like that, the planning was complete. Every outfit selected, every mental rehearsal performed, every piece of leverage secured. All that remained was to wait for the moment, the room, the family, the unsuspecting parents, and the culmination of years of struggle. In a few hours, everything would change. I could almost feel the air crackle with anticipation, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I went to bed that night with one thought repeating in my mind. Tomorrow they would see me. Tomorrow they would realize that the person they abandoned had become unstoppable. And tomorrow, everything would be different. The morning of the reunion felt strangely calm, like the air before a storm. I woke up before my alarm, heart steady, mind razor sharp. Every detail I had planned for weeks suddenly felt real. This wasn't a dream or a fantasy anymore. Today was the day I stepped back into the world of the people who had left me behind. I dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing the outfit that told my story without a single word. It wasn't about showing off wealth or status, no. It was about radiating strength, confidence, independence. I looked in the mirror one last time, and for the first moment in years, I didn't see the abandoned graduate. I saw someone who had climbed from nothing to everything, someone who didn't need parents to define their worth. The transformation was undeniable. And today they would see it too. The reunion was held at a grand event hall, the kind of place where families gathered to brag about their accomplishments and take pictures for social media. As I pulled up, I paused for a moment, letting my breath settle. My fingers brushed over the doorknob. Then, with a steady exhale, I stepped out. From the moment I walked through the entrance, the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of shock you hear in movies, but a ripple, a subtle shift in the air. Conversations softened, gazes lifted, and within seconds, all eyes began drifting toward me. The whispers followed almost immediately. Is that? No way. Look at them, I haven't seen them in years. Relatives I barely remembered stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost, a polished, upgraded, unrecognizable version of the child they had quietly pitied or ignored. Their eyes trailed from my posture to my calm expression, trying to piece together what had happened to me in the years since I vanished from their gatherings. But the real moment, the one I had rehearsed 1,000 times, came when I spotted them. My parents. They stood near the center of the room, smiling politely at some distant aunt. But the moment their eyes met mine, the color drained from their faces. My mother's smile froze, her lips parting ever so slightly. My father stiffened, as if bracing for an impact he hadn't seen coming. The shock in their eyes was everything I had prepared for. Confusion, guilt, fear, and something else, something that felt surprisingly satisfying, regret. They didn't speak at first, neither did I. I just held their gaze, steady and unshaken, letting silence do what words never could. Every second felt like a year passing between us, a reminder of the years I survived alone. Finally, my mother took a hesitant step forward. "You're here?" she managed, voice trembling slightly. Yes, I replied quietly, letting the single word echo. I am. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, nervous, uncertain of who I had become. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain composure, but even from a distance I could see the strain in his jaw. He wasn't prepared for this. Neither of them were. Relatives hovered around us, whispering, exchanging confused glances. The tension was thick. Every pair of eyes in the room flicked between us, sensing something heavy, something unresolved, something dangerously close to exploding. My parents tried to act normal, offering awkward smiles, shallow greetings, but the facade cracked easily. Every sentence they attempted was laced with panic. Every glance they stole at me revealed a deeper fear, that I wasn't the child they abandoned. I had become a stranger, stronger, calmer, and no longer under their control. And I let them feel it. Every bit of it. I moved around the room gracefully, connecting with relatives, answering their curious questions with confidence, never once raising my voice or acting bitter. I didn't need to. My presence alone spoke louder than anger ever could. I answered questions about my success, my accomplishments, my career, all with a calmness that made the room buzz with astonishment. He did all that? Alone. She's come so far, without any help? Incredible. Each comment made my parents shrink a little more. They tried to join conversations, but eyes darted away from them. Everyone knew the truth, or at least, enough to realize the gravity of what they had done. The guilt weighed on them visibly. Still I stayed composed. I didn't lash out. I didn't cause a scene. I simply existed as proof of everything they tried to suppress. Proof that abandoning me hadn't destroyed me, it had sharpened me. But the moment I had saved for last, the final blow, was still waiting. Near the end of the reunion, when people began settling into their seats for dessert, I approached the stage. Murmurs swept through the hall as I walked up, calm and collected. I took the microphone, my parents staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. I just want to take a moment, I began, voice steady, to thank everyone here for being part of this family. Even when we don't all stay connected, these gatherings remind us of what matters: support, love, and showing up for each other. My parents visibly flinched. And speaking of showing up, I paused, letting the silence tighten around the room. There was a time when someone was left behind. Abandoned. Forgotten. But they didn't fall apart, they rose. The whispers exploded. Some relatives gasped. Others stared between me and my parents, already piecing the puzzle together. Then I delivered the line I had been saving, the revelation that would change everything. And today, that person is standing right here. Gasps filled the room. My parents paled. And I held my ground, letting my truth settle into every corner of the hall. When the reunion finally ended, the hall slowly emptied, leaving behind scattered chairs, half-finished conversations, and the lingering shock of what had unfolded. People left in small groups, some still whispering, others glancing back at me with a mixture of awe and admiration. But I didn't move. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me, letting the weight of everything settle. For the first time in years I felt free. My parents lingered on the far side of the room, frozen in a quiet panic, unsure whether to approach me or run from the truth that had just been laid bare. I watched them carefully, not with anger but with a strange calmness. Their faces told the whole story: confusion, guilt, fear, and the unmistakable realization that they had created this moment through their own choices. They had abandoned me. I had survived without them. Now they had to live with what they'd done. As I gathered my things and turned to leave, my mother took a hesitant step toward me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I paused. A few years ago her voice would have shattered me. Now it barely wavered my breath. "Maybe another time," I replied gently, not out of cruelty, but because I wasn't ready to reopen wounds that had only just begun to close. She seemed to understand. Her shoulders fell and she stepped back, defeated in a way I had never seen before. My father didn't even attempt to speak. He just looked at me with a mixture of regret and something that almost resembled admiration. Walking out of the hall felt like stepping into a new life. One I had built with my own hands, one no one could take from me. The night air was cool, crisp against my skin, and as I breathed it in, a deep satisfaction stirred in my chest. Not the satisfaction of revenge or humiliation, but the satisfaction of victory. I had stood before the people who abandoned me and proved, without yelling or fighting, that their choices had not broken me. If anything, they had forged me into someone stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I ever imagined. Still, a part of me wrestled with the question: was this enough? Was this closure? Did I want revenge? Forgiveness? Or something in between? As I walked to my car, I replayed the entire night, the gasps, the whispers, my parents' stunned faces, and I realized something important. Closure isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's about recognizing your own growth, acknowledging the pain without letting it define you, and choosing your future over your past. Could I forgive them someday? Maybe. Did I need to forgive them right now? No. What mattered was that I no longer carried the weight of their abandonment. And that was enough. When I finally reached my car and sank into the driver's seat, a slow, bittersweet smile curled across my lips. I had spent years building myself from the ground up, and tonight I stood tall in front of the very people who once left me behind. They saw me, truly saw me, and that alone was the closure I needed. I started the engine feeling lighter than I had in years. The road stretched ahead, open and endless, and for the first time my past wasn't chasing me, it was behind me exactly where it belonged. I didn't have to look back. I didn't have to justify myself to anyone. My success, my resilience, my strength was proof enough. Before I pulled away, I whispered the final words to myself, a promise, a reminder, and a quiet declaration of everything I had become. I made it without them. And I will keep rising, because I finally know my worth. And if you've stayed with me through this journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive.